Thank you. Good morning. Does everyone want to take a little stretch? I'm sure you do, yeah? Feel free to stand up where you are and take a little stretch. Feels good. Get the circulation going. Well, good morning, everyone. I first and foremost would like to express my most humble and honored expression that I have been invited to speak this morning as a plenary speaker, especially in light of the quality of the speakers that we've had so far this week, and in the breakout sessions and in the biblical teaching. It's really an honor to be asked to be up here today, and I'm very thankful. I'd also like to admit that I am the first time to come to ICMDA. I've been very blessed, and I certainly have enjoyed every minute so far. I have been involved in the CMF Kenya for quite a while, and I must admit I haven't come to CMDA before, but I am going to rectify that mistake. God willing, this will not happen again. So I would like to acknowledge, first and foremost, from listening to lots of conversations over the last day, and also the various breakout session topics, that there's probably a lot of people in this audience who I would like to acknowledge probably know a lot more of about this topic than I do, and are probably a lot more expert than I am. And then this will be a bit of a different approach than you've had in the last little while. So I have some disclaimers to start off with, and the first and the foremost is that I'm a surgeon. And I am not an AI expert. And when I was given this topic, I really basically went on a journey for myself to find really what does AI mean for us as Christians and Christian healthcare workers in a world that for me at the time, because AI is not my field, was filled with a lot of secular and worldly paradigms, ideas and constructs that felt very anti-Christian and didn't in any way feel in sync with what we would think as Christians and biblical believers. I'm also a born-again Christian, and so I really left it to the Lord to work through me on this journey. And I really actually was thankful and enjoyed every minute of it and felt very blessed. And so I'm really hoping that as I take you on the journey I went through, learning more about AI, that you will also be blessed this morning. Now, technology is not new. Especially as doctors, we are very, very familiar with technology. And certainly this Maasai gentleman in the savannah of Tanzania or Kenya using his cell phone and using the internet is certainly not in any way a new user to AI, or pardon me, to any kind of technology. And even AI itself is not new. It was named AI actually in 1955 by John McCarthy. And ChatGPT, when it was started in November of 2022, within 5 days, it had 1 million users. So the problem with AI is not that it's a new technology, but the issue is how rapidly it has come on the scene, how rapidly it has emerged compared to any other technology that we have had, and also how ubiquitous it is throughout the country. So that makes it difficult for someone like me, who's not an AI person, who works in Kenya, to understand and feel the full implications of AI. And of course, we also have a large number of social media and headlines and news lines and information that is coming at you at all times that isn't always syncing with what we think as Christian. And so I'd like to go through some of those paradigms that I felt at first when I didn't know as much about AI were really the paradigms that sort of made me look at AI and made me very skeptical. The first is this sort of doomsday thing that they always talk about with AI, that it's kind of apocalyptic and it'll cause a sort of end of the world scene, this very negative scene where it will take, AI robots will take over the world and humans themselves will almost be destroyed. As well, it's also been discussed a lot as an AI existential threat, even to the point of discussing human extinction. And this is not being discussed by small people. It's being discussed by billionaires, the people who are actually developing AI, the people who are at the head of AI. There's Elon Musk telling us that in 5 years, human intelligence will be surpassed by AI. And this is Sir Demis, and I hope I say his last name correctly, Hassabis. He's a very well-known British AI developer who brings two huge dual threats. One, that evil actors could get a hold of AI and bring out evil results. But even more concerning is that AI, as it becomes more powerful, more autonomous, that it actually we could lose control of it. And the underpinnings of that fear for these gentlemen is the fact that the AI developers themselves, when they talk about some of the more powerful AI tools, don't even know how some of the tasks they actually do them. And so this doom and gloom that we hear just continues. Jeff Bezos recently talked at a major tech conference in Europe, and he spoke about if we starve data infrastructure of cooling resources, meaning water, we need to do that just to sustain baseline human comfort. In other words, he's comparing the use of water for cooling AI and prioritizing it over water for human comfort. And not only is he prioritizing it, he's actually justifying it. And as a Christian, we know that anything that would justify and prioritize a human value below an AI machine is not in keeping with Christian values. It's not in keeping with what we as Christians and Bible-based individuals would believe. So there's a voice out there, there's an agenda out there that's speaking into the social media and speaking into the news, that's speaking a lot about AI, making it more important than us, making it more superior or appear more superior to us. This goes even farther when it comes to AI chatbots and AI avatars, people on computers or humanoids on computers that are really AI tools. People start to have relationships with these chatbots. They have romantic relationships. They've even married. They've even made movies about people having relationships. Well, there's even been a study that they've used from UCS that talked about where they interviewed participants, and they showed that if the participants thought it was an AI chatbot without a person, they actually showed them more of their personal self, more of their pain and their sorrows, and more of their sadness than if they thought the AI chatbot was actually driven by a human being, because some of the participants were told it was driven by a human being. So how is that an AI chatbot could be superior to us in making a human connection? Well, you know, humans, we are very good at anthropomorphizing things. You know, these are my 12 rescue dogs, and we love to make non-human things human. And there they are at Christmas. I love to dress them up in their Christmas fare, and I'm sure they love it much less than I do. They're probably just looking for their treat at the end of the picture. Then I'd like to share a story that I don't know if many of you maybe in the room remembered Clippy. This is from Microsoft Office back in the 90s. And so when I was a general surgery resident, and the cold, horrible nights when you would be on call, you obviously were always hungry, you were always tired, and you were always worried about the next morning about how your consultant or your chief resident would berate you for either doing something or not doing something. And of course, as a general surgery resident, you were never allowed to be hungry, never allowed to sleep, and never allowed to be wrong, because of course, as a surgeon, it's in your DNA, correct? There must be some people in the room from my generation, yeah? So of course, there was no one I could talk to. Who could I talk to that wouldn't judge me because I'm supposed to be a general surgery resident who can do all of this? So of course, who would I talk to? I would talk to Clippy. Is Clippy, even though he didn't talk back then, he was animated and he would respond, and little boxes would come up that was kind to me and would say, "Can I help you?" So I would talk to Clippy because I had no one else. I had no one else to trust. And this is really, I think, the essential when we look at the AI chat box. People are putting forward that they're more superior, putting forward that they can be like humans, see, they can make human connections. Someone even wants to marry them. But I think really, let's turn it around. Isn't it more a reflection of these are an increasing world of loneliness? It's an increasing world of social fragmentation. It's a world where research has shown people have fewer friends in their inner circle than people had in the 50s. It shows these days, there's research that people are thinking less about the purpose of their life and meaning of life. We're living in a time of increasing social isolation. I think the AI chatbot is really there because we as Christians and our society have really let people down. We are not non-judgmental when someone tells us a crisis in their life. And I think this is a call for us as Christians to step up, to be able to be that more loving community that doesn't allow people to need to go to that AI chatbot or to that avatar. Then also, too, of course, there's the commercialization. And this is marketing pushing forward that here we have diagnostic testing that's even AI models better than doctors. And this was developed by Harvard, but it's actually being produced and put out into the market by a healthcare company called Bayesian. And you can see there on the right where they're talking about in real-world tests that it was better than doctors. But at the top, the Harvard group actually published the information in Science. And if you read the publication, what they were actually doing is comparing their new AI tool to ChatGPT-4. And really, they only involved 2 physicians. So you can see the way the marketing system, because it is being driven by an agenda of profit, it's being driven by an agenda of getting money back for their investment, that they're taking what is a truth and making it a half-truth. So as Christians, we have to be able to stand up to this and be able to look for what is really the truth and look behind it. And I think the biggest untruth that the agenda out there of the AI promoters, particularly those oligarchs, those big guys, there's about 6, 7, or 8 of them who are pushing AI, who are really the developers, the large investments, the billions and trillions of dollars, is that they're trying to say that because AI is better than doctors, and of course we all know doctors are smart, and of course, AI can build relationships with people and have people marry them, that they also must be able to feel. They must be able to have an actual subjective experience, especially generative AI that solves problems and can use emotional words. But there are some AI developers that have said, no, AI can say I'm hungry, but it can't be hungry. It doesn't have a stomach. Yeah? And what they really are getting at is, does AI have an internal dialogue that lets it know its own existence in this greater world? Does it differentiate really its inner self as itself from you or me? And I think this really comes down to consciousness. And really, what is consciousness? And does AI have consciousness? And really, this comes back to a very good analogy that comes from an essay in the 70s by a philosopher that talks about what it's like to be a bat. And really, it's comparing if I think, me, Jana, about what it's like to be a bat, depending on what I know about bats and where they live and what they eat, can I think about what it's like to be a bat? And is that thinking about being a bat the same as how the bat thinks about being a bat? No, it's not possible. How I think about being Jana is, even if you try to think about how I think about it, it's not the same consciousness. And so this, I think, is also best said by, this was the chess master. His name was Garry Kasparov. I hope I'm saying it correctly. And he was beaten by Deep Blue, which was a supercomputer as AI intelligence. And he was so depressed that at the end, the only thing he could say that really made him feel better was he said, well, at the very least, I know that Deep Blue didn't enjoy beating me. So I think that really consciousness is something that we really have to remember, that we own it. We as human beings, with our intrinsic value, known by God, loved by God, separate from each individual. And we have to really be aware of all of these messages that are out there that are telling us the exact opposite about AI in a variety of ways. And I think as a Christian, it takes us back to Psalms 119 that says, Lord, your word is forever. It is firmly fixed. So if the word is firmly fixed, the rest of what I say is already known. Your faithfulness is for all generations, the generation now and the generation 100 years from now using AI, and the generation 100 years ago. You established the earth, and it stands firm. They stand today in accordance with your judgments, for all things, including AI, are your servants. And I think as Christians going forward, we really need to remember that, stay rooted in that, stay firm in that, and watch for those times when the agenda out there is trying to tell us AI is better than humans and put fear and disinformation into the hearts of many. So let's switch now and talk a little bit about what's good about AI. Now, I'm a surgeon, and I had to learn a little bit about what AI was, but believe me, I will keep it simple because that's what we do as surgeons. We're very concrete. So, data in, computation, output out. And basically, these days, algorithms are actually what they call neural networks. Because once again and again, you see what they're trying to do is actually imitate the human brain. They don't fully understand the human brain, but we know who does. And they also call neural networks now a digital brain. And I don't think it's by accident that they're referring to this highly complex, self-learning AI tools as being digital brains and talking about it as if it's a brain. It's once again the way in which the world tries to take control, tries to say it knows everything, tries to say it doesn't need God. And so deep neural networks are a way in which now we don't just do typical prediction and rules-based. It even now creates content. It's created symphonies as good as Mozart himself. And in particular, what we most are going to talk about is generative AI. And that's the AI at the very end there that produces novel output, creative output, that can self-learn and can actually do tasks from patterns and data that actually it wasn't even taught. Now, I'm not a computer scientist, and of course there's a million different terms for this, and it gets very complicated. But I think the most important thing to remember, instead of the names of all of the models, whether it's an imitation model or a reinforcement model or deep neural networks or machine learning or supervised or unsupervised, I tried to look that all up, but I gave up. But what I came away with is that technology, wherever it is never, ever neutral. You know, many times we think of technology, whether it's a CT scanner or nuclear medicine or whatever it might be, as something that's objective. But technology is not neutral. You can see in what we just talked about, it requires data. So therefore, whoever is owning it, financing it, putting the data in, developing it, continuing to use it, because when you use it, you're putting data in and you're continuing to develop it. You are actually characterizing it, and it is being characterized. And therefore, many of the models we talk about are actually, we have to keep and remember. So for example, the AI chatbot that goes ahead and improves people, wants people to have a relationship with it, is actually geared to be very patient, to say positive things, to give that reinforcement. Technology is not neutral. So if any of you are of my era, you remember this poor woman who it would be called post-call to do a discharge summary on a patient, and of course they were 84 and had been in hospital 20 times and had 10 drugs, and you see the pile of files that are there. And you all have to admit that the era is better than this now, that EHRs and EMRs have stepped us up for sure. We don't want to go back. So even though we've seen that there are some real agendas out there with the AI, and we as Christians have to be aware of that, and we have to be rooted in the Word and rooted in what God tells us about ourselves, I don't want to go back to that pile of papers. I want to look at what the AI can do for me as a Christian and how I can utilize it as a Christian healthcare worker. And I'd just like to divert for a minute and talk about student learning, because as I was preparing for this presentation, one of my medical students came in, and my mentee, and said, "Oh, what are you doing?" And I said, "I'm working on my presentation." And he looked at me and goes, "Oh, you're doing it the old-fashioned way." And the reason he said that was because I was sitting and I had 3 or 4 books that, these kind of books that are bound with paper. And on the other side of me, I had a notepad and a pen and, of course, a highlighter. You must always have a highlighter. And I was really taken aback. But I spoke with him some more. And he told me about how now, basically, students don't use these books. These books are now all digital or they're out of stock. And basically, they use it to summarize what's important. They use it to look up what's the best MCQs. They look at to review the things that they should for the exam. And so it has really lowered the barrier for learning. It has really equalized access to knowledge. But also at the same time, I asked him, "What textbook are you actually using?" And he told me the name, which I won't mention. It was a decent one. But it was from 2013. So that's 13 years old. So even though we have increased access to information, we still have barriers to access to all information. So let's talk now a little bit about specialties and healthcare and medicine, because we are all healthcare specialists. Let's talk first. AI has been most successful in the healthcare realm in those types of specialties that use a lot of pattern recognition. And radiology is one of those. And as you can see here, radiologists like you and me are not perfect. They make misdiagnoses, and unfortunately, in a setting like America, misdiagnoses means a lot of medical claims and lawsuits. So therefore, anything that can make what you do now better is a good thing. And basically, research has showed that using AI for recognition in radiology has improved the accuracy tremendously and has reduced the error rate significantly. And the most important part of this research has showed that the two together, a radiologist with a second read by AI, or AI reading it first with a radiologist reading it second, is far better than either one alone. And not only can it read with more accuracy, it reads with more speed. So can you imagine? There might be a radiologist that might come out and greet you when you go for your next chest X-ray or for your next ultrasound. Because how many of you have had an X-ray report where you looked at the result and you thought, if only that radiologist knew some clinical background, he wouldn't answer this way. Good thing I know this patient. I'm sure you've all have seen those kind of X-ray reports. Imagine now if a radiologist had the time to go out and meet the patient and then go out afterwards and speak to them and make a connection and tell them about the result and tell them what it might mean and what might be the next step. In McGill, they've actually developed an MRI scan that can predict Alzheimer's disease. And it can predict it pretty accurately. So you can imagine, you go in from a brain scan, you give them some of your data, and out comes a little piece of paper that says, in 2 years' time, you have a 95% chance of Alzheimer's. I think that little piece of paper would be very distressing. But therefore we need, and my point is that therefore we need radiologists. Because when we're developing these predictive models that are strong, that are predicting devastating things like I find a cancer in your lung, I find Alzheimer's in your brain, you need that human touch to then go out to the person and tell them what they found and explain it to them and tell them in the context of which it was found and what is the next steps. So no, I don't think AI is going to take radiology's jobs. Now, radiology, the good thing about AI is it's being used to make what we do now better with speed and precision. But what also AI is good is for using our imagination for things that we could never have imagined would be possible before. And these are some examples from radiology. MRI scans now can do something they call radiomics, where they can actually take a scan and tell the genetic makeup of a tumor. And we all know, any of you who do oncology, that it's very important to know some of those genetic mutations. They determine prognosis, they determine treatment. It's also been shown that some AI tools are better at reading X-rays so that you don't need a CT scan or an MRI, which is expensive, increased radiation, and maybe if you live in a rural location, means a trip 100 kilometers away or 50. It can also improve the quality of CT scans themselves so that perhaps they become smaller, more portable, more affordable, and even reduce the amount of radiation that you get. Another pattern type of specialty is pathology. Now, one thing I'd like to mention, it says Path AI. So many of these things are not open access. They are often developed by AI startup groups, or they're developed by an academic university who then partners with a business, so the business can then develop the product. So we can see the agenda for many of these is not patient-centric design, but rather profit and return on the dollar to their investor. So Path AI, though, is a big company that has developed AI tools for the lab. And if you're a pathologist, you have about a 3% error rate when you're reading a slide. And AI has about a 3% error rate. But when you put the two together, the error rate goes well below 1%. Which is a substantial difference when you're looking at slides for, say, pathology of cancer. There's a variety of other specialties, like, for example, ophthalmology, dermatology, that are also pattern specialties. Ophthalmology now, there's a business called Lumitex that has the first FDA-approved AI completely autonomous tool that can look in the eyes of diabetic patients and tell whether or not they have diabetic retinopathy. Now, the way this is being used is it's being used in the primary care facility so that then it screens individuals to make sure they get to the ophthalmologist so that they can get the treatment they need earlier, quicker, without being missed. And we all know how many diabetics we have across the globe. Once again, as you can see, it is an AI tool that is in the hands of the private sector. Also in pathology, not just helping us do better at what we do, pathology now is being used various AI tools to actually look for things that pathologists have before never been able to see. So we know increasingly the importance of the biology of tumors and what that means for a cancer. So now there's tools with AI that can look at the RNA, can look at the DNA, and start to be able to tell us much earlier the prognosis and the treatment for certain oncologies. And dermatology as well. We can detect skin cancers and reduce and avoid diagnostic biopsies where the doctor, like myself, says, yeah, that doesn't look good, let's just take it off. Remember, when you go to a surgeon, we like to operate. So the advantage is, you can imagine, how many countries do not even have these specialties? Even in Canada, where I was born and where I lived and did most of my training till I moved to Kenya, in northern Canada, there are no dermatologists. There are no pathologists. And if you want to go a 2-hour plane ride away to a dermatologist, the wait time is over a year. So you can imagine it's not a matter of being an LMIC. It's a matter of distribution. It's a matter that these specialties are still rare everywhere in the world and are a distribution problem more than anything. So you can imagine how this could correct that. Now let's talk a little broader. So that's very narrow focused, very specialty focused, very task oriented. But AI is increasingly getting more and more complex that it can actually be clinical decision support systems. And this was a system developed by 2 dermatologists where you can take your smartphone, You have the app on your smartphone. You take a picture of the skin lesion, and it can give you the most likely diagnosis, a differential diagnosis, and it can also give you the treatment options and even the prognosis. And you can imagine in primary care or places where there isn't a dermatologist, how useful this can be for people to have access to a care they did not have before. So this was started by 2 dermatologists, but it was so successful that they've actually included many other specialties. And it's even now being used in many university medical schools in both Canada and the United States for actually training medical students. So this is a screenshot of a page of the University of Saskatchewan, which is in the middle of Canada, the medical school there, where the students can go onto this page and download any of those apps. And you can see the app I just talked to is at the bottom there, the Visual DX, and have what they consider free access to these apps that they can then use to learn on by having case scenarios that give them examples, that give them the treatment, that give them the differential. But I put free in brackets because they've paid tuition to go to this university, and this is a university in a setting that has an infrastructure and it has a resource, because this is not free. You have to pay a subscription. And what many of the AI companies are doing, in an attempt, in all fairness to them, to make it affordable, is they're not making a high initial output cost. Like if you buy software from Microsoft, they give you, it's $1,000 or some huge amount, but rather they ask for a subscription. But of course, subscriptions, as we all know, only last a year. So there's still huge issues around cost of AI when we talk about actual equity. So let's talk about scribes, because many people use scribes. And once again, you can see it has a business title, so it is a commercial entity. But it allows you now to not worry about doing any notes before, any notes after. It is in the consultation room. It takes the patient's, whatever the patient is telling you, it talks whatever you're telling, it puts it down and transcribes it into a template that then is uploaded into the EMR. So you can imagine the time that it saves, and the biggest part is the presence you can give to your patient. You can forget about doing any paperwork. The scribe is doing it for you. You can sit. Now in this one, the doctor is standing, unfortunately, so it's not the best picture. But you can sit, you can look the patient in the eye, you can listen, you can be present. And we all know how trust is built through making that patient feel like they are the center of your attention. But now we're taking it even farther. We're going out of the hospital, and just this year in 2026, from January to February, every one of these big AI companies, and these are the big movers and shakers, have put out a health AI tool. So this is a tool where the patient can go and ask any question they want about the drug they're given, the disease they were told they had, the test result they have. But the advantage is it can also hold all of their data. It can hold all of your test results. It can hold all of your clinic visits and what the doctor told you and didn't tell you. It can hold all your operations and what the discharge summary said and what your complication was. And you can take it with you anywhere you go in the world. It's internet-based. And so, of course, it is increasingly now being connected to what? To smartwatches. So Apple is connecting the smartwatch. There's a ring called Aura. Google has a Pixel smartwatch. And increasingly what is attaching to these health apps is your daily dynamic health information. Your heart rate variability. How much did you sleep? What did you eat yesterday? Did you actually do your exercise? What is your blood sugar? And that is the future we're moving to, as well as increasingly people are, in Canada in particular, and many places in the world, are seeing their doctor virtually. So kind of like what Professor Wyatt, I should say, was saying on the first night, as he was talking about the hospital becoming fossilized. Increasingly, that is going to happen. The physical location of healthcare is going to change. You are going to have all of your health information, and you will control it. You will have access to it. And you will virtually meet your doctor and probably go to the hospital only for maybe having babies and having an intervention. So let's talk a little bit about research and AI. This is the Human Genome Project, and it, in 2022, mapped the entire human genome, which is 33 billion DNA sequence pairs. It is an incredible number of pairs, but you can imagine that cancer, we know, is a gene-based disease. It is a mutation in the gene. So you can imagine the power of AI now in cancer research to now start to look at the human genome from a different point of view, to look at its various mutations and interactions to get to the heart of many cancer etiologies and even treatments. But you know, as a Christian, the flip side, when I hear something like this, is if you actually read about this Human Genome Project, they've not yet mapped the Y chromosome. As well, they have basically the vast majority of these genes, both their functions and interactions, we still don't even yet have any idea what they do. So as the secular gurus are telling us that AI is going to replace human intelligence, as they continue to tell us the power of AI, and it is powerful, we know a God who knows all this genome. We know a God who knows already the function of all these genes and their interactions. And it's us humans who yet do not know all of that. So one area that it's really AI is coming and helping is in drug development. Drug development drugs are extremely expensive, especially biologics. They're thousands of dollars, and a lot of that is due to research and development. The smallest histogram bar here on the left is drugs we already have that are approved. The histogram on the right is compounds that are potential drugs. That's more compounds than the stars in the solar system. So you can imagine why it takes years to determine what drug we should even try in order to maybe be successful. And so this is where AI can step in. And by using computational AI, they are now reducing what used to be years to determine compounds to take to clinical trials. It's now even being reduced to 18 months. And even further, you have organizations like ATOM, where you have acceleration of therapeutics by you have Duke University, Tulane University, coming together, multidisciplinary groups, engineers, oncologists, public health specialists, all coming together to look at what drugs may be the most effective, and going ahead and using AI to then pick the most effective ones. And it's showing up to be so successful that Eli Lilly, a main drug company, is willing to pay ATOM $2.7 billion in order to have these AI-determined drugs be tried in clinical trials. But of course, you can see in this algorithm, very important is still humans. We still need to be at the table determining which direction to go, what diseases to look for, what are the loopholes, what are the side effects we want to avoid, what are the problems and the caveats of this disease. We still need to be at the table. Increasingly, AI is doing a lot of the grunt work for us, and a lot of the work we couldn't do in 100 years. But we still need to be there to drive it, to drive the big questions. We need to be curious. We need to be innovators. We need to be thinking outside the box so that we can use AI to its maximum. And let me say the last about healthcare in terms of surgery, because of course I'm a surgeon. And of course we have the Da Vinci robot. And the latest one, the Da Vinci 5, now has AI capabilities. And so as a result of that, it actually now can take instructions. It can actually be told what to do. It can take corrections as it does it. It can use imitation models where it watches thousands of videos of cholecystectomies or whatever laparoscopic surgery you want and actually learn to do parts of it and have certain tasks that are actually now autonomous, making this much more safe. The caveat to this one, and to many of these, which I'll talk about in a minute, is that there is no clinical data that shows improved clinical outcomes. They have shown things like less conversion to open, but no reduced mortality, no improved long-term cancer mortality, no improved complications. You even have a scribe that you can take into a sterile OR, so you don't have to do an OR note. It can be there, you can talk into it, and at the end of the surgery, everything has been recorded and uploaded to the EMR. In the operating room itself, you can have a coach. I don't know about you, but my son's soccer team has a coach, and the coach shows up at every game, and the coach is on the sideline, and the coach is cheering them on and telling them, do this, every single game. But surgeons, we don't do that. We have, when I was a general surgeon, chief surgeon, when I was a chief resident, I always knew that I had a consultant who could come into the room. Sometimes they would come in, I could ask them to help me. But once I became a surgeon, that's it. I'm there, and I'm there on my own. Yes, we can ask for a second opinion, but my colleague is operating in the other room, he can't come right now, or they don't know this patient, or they're not familiar with this surgery. But AI could be a coach in my room every case, not just with the difficult cases. It can help me decide if this is a good plane to be in. It can help me decide and put images of the actual x-rays on top of what I'm looking at to see whether I'm getting an oncological margin or not. It can help me when I have a difficult patient like a Whipple's, and I'm getting to a point where I'm not sure if I should continue, because it also knows all of the imaging. It knows the patient's premorbidity. It knows all of the data about the patient, and it can help to correlate all of that together to give me some impression about whether I should continue. It can tell me when the blood pressure is dropping, so maybe I shouldn't go forward and do it this way. I should quickly get out of Dodge and put them back together another day. So it's a coach that I would love to have in the OR to keep me increasingly safe for my patients. And yes, of course, Stanford and Johns Hopkins have a huge lab looking to do a totally autonomous surgery. And as of last year, they were able to develop this AI-driven robot that has done a completely autonomous cholecystectomy. The only caveat is it's been done on a pig. So we still have a ways to go. But now, what does this mean for us? What does it mean? It means that we need, because these tools are out there, because these tools are available, because many hospitals are starting to use these tools. Robots are, even though they have no clinical outcome data, are in so many hospitals. I don't know the exact number off the top of my head in America. Even Canada, which is a government-sponsored universal healthcare, has robots. The UK has robots. I'm sure in East Asia, in Korea, I'm sure you have robots. Yeah? And so we need to have a discussion. AI is here. What do? We need to open the conversation, discuss scenarios, review and discern together. Because that is when we will shape whether progress becomes a source of shared flourishing or a driver of inequality. And we're at that precipice where we need to start to look at how we can maintain flourishing and not increase the divide. So that's finishing up with a few disadvantages, because of course we've talked about what it's useful for, but it has some innate disadvantages because it is a technology. It can hallucinate, especially if it doesn't understand the context and give misleading information. And it's very private sector driven. Last year, Google and OpenAI petitioned the US president to not regulate AI, which will be in the healthcare sphere, education sphere, for 10 years. Thank goodness the Senate threw that out, but it shows the power of these companies, the money they have, the prestige they have, the connections they have, and they're the ones driving the agenda, not us. That is why we need to be at the table. We need to be at the seat to be talking about this. It needs large databases that are valid, representative, and encompass all data, because otherwise that's when biases enter. And now what happens? What does the WHO do when it comes to global burden of disease? They estimate. Why do they estimate? Because there isn't data in so many countries in the world. So what's going to happen when our large data sets come from only certain populations and certain places in the world? We need to develop that infrastructure. We need to be supporting and advocating for this data, because without the data from all representation, we are not going to get the output that is useful for all representation. And then lastly, capital investment. Unfortunately, so much of this has been then put out from the universities to companies to sell, either through subscription or through yearly payments or just through investment. And of course, their bottom line is what? Profit and getting money back. There is a lot of free open AI, but as we say in English, there's nothing truly free. There is an underlying covert intention, and that is every time you use a free open AI, that data you put in there is training that AI. So you be very careful if you're a researcher or you're putting in any information that you don't necessarily want to be used, because those open access, open source AIs are using it to train themselves. And of course, at some point, when is that free going to go away? Right now it's free, but we wonder, is it free because they need our data to actually train their tools better? And at some point, it will no longer be free. And will that not necessarily just increase the rich-poor gap? Not the LMIC high income. No, 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 no. I don't know about you guys, but we have poor people in Canada. Yeah? We have marginalized people in Canada. And I'm not even going to talk about the States because I'm not American, but I've worked there. You guys have poor people. Yeah? So it is not about high income, low income. It's about every country that's here. It's going to increase the rich and poor gap. Of course, I must, I'm an animal lover and a conservation, be ending with this ecological and societal impact. These huge data centers that are required to drive these AIs are the size of 4 sizes of a huge city. They take billions of dollars to make. They take enormous amounts of energy, electrical energy, to run the computing. They take huge amounts of water, like Jeff Bezos said at the beginning, or Bezos, I should say, said at the beginning, where he was actually saying, you know, we're going to have to give up a little human comfort. Of course, it's not going to be his human comfort, right? In order to give water to these things. These are huge issues, and they're actually displacing individuals as well. In the American Medical Association survey, 80% of physicians was using AI. 3 years ago, only half used it. What we have to realize is AI is here. The question is not, is it here or where is it? The question is, are we being thoughtful enough to use it well? So let me just finish with 2 more things here. One is, what is weakness? So we talked about disadvantages of the technology itself. Now, what are the weaknesses that happen to us when we use that technology? And the things we have to be careful of is automation bias, giving authority and always thinking the computer is correct. De-skilling, where gastroenterologists who use colonoscopies and look up for polyps when they don't have their AI or poorer at getting polyps. Losing critical thinking, losing the ability to have confidence in your own judgment. And then the biggest one is where AI healthcare is more personalized and adaptable and even home-based. What will that mean for human connection? Will we value it less? Will we want to have it less often? Will we have a higher expectation for human interaction as we have less and less connection because AI is the one that is giving us a lot of our information? And this is the typical doctor-patient relationship that we all know and is iconic. And let me finish with my last thoughts about AI, which is that this is an excellent book for anyone who wants to read it, that basically Eric Topol speaks about the immense opportunity of AI today is to re-establish the doctor-patient relationship, to re-put trust back into medicine, by freeing us from administrative things, freeing us from a lot of the mundane tasks and things of the day, to make, as machines get smarter, make us humans become more humane. Let us end with definitely a verse that as AI continues to progress and shock us, many, many headlines ponder, is it limitless? But let us remember that God told us through David, that David said, I have seen a limit to all perfection, but your command is without limit. I would really like to end with one last special private story about what happened to me when I was an intern. I was talking about human healthcare workers and basically putting us in the center for suffering. My mom died of gastric cancer when I was an intern. And for a few months, of course, there's that whole time when she's dying and you're going through the suffering of it. And when she was getting closer and closer to the end, it was my time to do call one weekend. I hope I get through this. And as I was doing my call, they asked me to go and talk to a family that had received bad news. So, you'll have to excuse me. So as I went to talk to the family, they had been told the day before their dad had cancer, and so they had many, many questions. Their questions they were asking me was about the suffering that I had just gone through. So they wanted to know about their suffering now and what it would be like going forward. And I was answering them, giving them life experience from the suffering I had actually just experienced. And I give this example because it was a time when my suffering met their suffering. And there was a human connection. So I would really like to end by telling you that all that is happening with AI is there. We need to improve AI literacy. We need to learn more about it. We need to make more noise to find out about it. We need to be putting the human connection back in. We need to be the ones that are at the table, keeping it patient-centric, human design-centric, and we need to be the ones that be there when the suffering comes through. Thank you very much for your attention.